share. Terry's never in the same room with the guests.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And even if they're in Philadelphia, they like, oh, I'll be in Philadelphia next week. I'll just do that. They would really prefer you stay away.
Okay, we're going to get started. So I see some new faces here and mostly familiar faces, so you'll have to forgive me if you've seen this before, but we're going to run through this. That there are NetSquared affiliates around the world, all associated with TechSoup Global, the nonprofit technology support service based out in California. And they tend to center around different themes, but usually around similar to the one that we settle on, which is the very broad theme of using the social web for social change. And so we support nonprofits and other activists in terms of sharing with one another and learning the benefits and the opportunities of using various social networking and social media opportunities. We do this primarily by having these Net Tuesdays on the first Tuesday of every month. Today, this Tuesday, we are starting our 6th year of doing this, as we've been doing on mostly the first Tuesdays. On the second Tuesday, we'll have a planning conference call. If anybody is interested in participating in that conference call, please see me. I'll give you access instructions. It'll be at 6 o'clock on Tuesday the 11th, a week from tonight, lasting no longer than an hour. We have a website you're welcome to check out, as well as a Google group that goes through flurries of activity when someone has a question or some sort of announcement to make. It sometimes can be very useful. The past year, these are the topics that have been around which we've had our Net Tuesdays. You'll see a recurring theme there of crowdsourcing change, which we do every couple of months, which is when we invite in a couple of local nonprofits, have them share what they're doing with their website and their social web strategies, and then get some advice, feedback, and general reactions from the crowd, which is whoever shows up. As we move forward into the summer, we'll be having another crowdsourcing change in August, and those are the other dates of the upcoming Net Tuesdays. In addition to what is going on in this room, we are streaming this live on the internet, or 15-second delay approximately on the internet, and we might get some participation from people outside of this room using the Twitter hashtag of PHLNET2. And back at the table back there, Andrew, who is going to raise his hand in a second. Andrew? There we go. Is monitoring the Twitter back channel and will voice questions or comments from cyberspace into the room as necessary, as appropriate. In addition to the Net Tuesdays themselves, we're a lot about networking. So please fill in the sign-in sheet there. I will, and make it legible. I'll take that information and recirculate it out to the group, just the people who are in the room. In addition, if you leave a business card, we'll scan that and send out the business scan of the business cards to people. Most people are wearing a tag, and you're invited to do that yourself. This is a way of not just a name tag, but also something else to tag yourself with. In this case, it's a question about a sound that you like, trying to stay with the theme here. And it's an opportunity for approaching other people and networking and trying to break into a conversation. We also have a no questions too stupid policy, and you're challenged to try and break that policy, but no one has yet. A little bit of housekeeping. So we have some food there. We want to make sure it all gets eaten. The Friends Center is a Platinum LEED certified building. We compost as much as possible. All of the food, including the meats and cheeses, all of the plates, the forks and spoons, and the cups are all compostable. So you can stick them into the green composting bucket there. Some of the other stuff you can recycle, especially the paper, and very little, except perhaps the plastic wrappings, really would go into the trash. The bathrooms are out in the hallway right past the elevators. We have Wi-Fi access in the room. Use the network that says Friends Guest. We're also, as I mentioned, video recording this. We have two cameras here. Only one of them is working right now, which is this one. So the video-free area is basically
everywhere
behind the camera. So you're all in the video-free area. But one thing to keep aware of is that we'll be using microphones, both with the panelists here, and we'll have a couple of wireless mics that will run around to try and capture people's voices when they have questions or comments, and we ask you to try and be patient and wait for a microphone, not so much so you can be heard in the room, but so that it can be picked up easily on the stream and the recording. If you park in the parking lot across 15th Street, you can get parking validation at the front desk and get a discount. And anybody who's interested is invited to come out for a bite or a drink afterwards, and we'll continue the conversation informally. The sponsor for tonight is the American Friends Service Committee, an international NGO that does peace and social justice work around the world, and is one of the tenants of this building. There are about 20 tenants of this building, many of whom are Quaker affiliated, but not all of whom, and the AFSC is sponsoring tonight. And that's essentially the introductory stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to just ask people to introduce themselves by using a microphone, and to just basically say, if you will, who you are, and if you have any experience with audio work, either podcasting or radio or any kind of thing that might be relevant here, you can state that, as well as what you'd really like to get out of the evening, and that'll give our panelists some sort of background about who's in the room right now, and they can adjust the remarks accordingly. So as I mentioned, I'm Seth Horowitz. I do work with the American Friends Service Committee. I work in the IT department, primarily in the areas of knowledge management and information architecture. I have very little experience with audio work, and my main interest in it is I think it's tremendously powerful. Ever since I started really listening to This American Life and hearing the power of audio without pictures, there's a certain kind of special power that happens with that, and I'd like to learn more about how to optimize that and take advantage of it.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Sharp. I work for a nonprofit that deals with intellectual disabilities and behavioral health in Northeast Philly, and I'm also a freelance writer for the nonprofit news website Generosity. I have next to no experience with audio, and I just hope to learn tonight.
Hi, Mitch Collier. I do scientific and health communications for federal government clients, and as far as audio, we've put up podcasts that were already recorded, or actually all we did was put up transcripts, and that just brings to mind that all audio should have a written transcript to go with it for accessibility reasons.
Hi, I'm Brianna Morgan with the Office of HIV Planning. I haven't worked very much with audio yet, but we do have a group of fantastic young men that come into our office for meetings that are looking to start a podcast about what it's like to be young and positive in Philadelphia, and to help encourage HIV testing. So anything that would help with that would be fantastic.
Hi, my name is Maithili Jagannathan. I run a writing and consulting business called Itinerant Inc. I do a lot of grant writing and fundraising consulting with nonprofits. I just came because I'm interested in audio in general. I love listening to audio. I also started running a few years ago, so that's sort of another dimension of like, where you could listen to things even other. I don't really like listening to music, but I like listening to other kinds of audio. So, when I'm running. So that's it.
Hi, I'm Donna Miller. I'm with Historic St. George's, and I'm interested in learning how to best organize video on a website, audio, and to get some best practices about the lengths of podcasts at work and how to let people know they're there.
I'm Alec Cox, a retired school counselor and member of the First United Methodist Church of Germantown. And I've come to realize the great power that the internet and the social media has around the world and what it's accomplished. And so I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to fund education and take the billions that we're spending on trying to buy security through a massive military and security apparatus and devote that to education and health care and things like that. And I'm particularly moved and saddened by the prospect of Bradley Manning being put in prison for helping our country to become what we should be in the world, and that's a place where there's transparency, and we believe in sharing information and trying, instead of trying to buy security through security and through the military and a huge intelligence apparatus.
Hi, I'm Brian Crenshaw. I have two social media interests. The first is I'm a volunteer for my son's choir, the Keystone State Boy Choir. And so I've sort of trial by fire learned a little bit about recording audio, and I'm sort of interested in how best to put that into a social media context. And I'm also work with the local Sierra Club group, and I'm interested in using social media to advocate for the environment. So.
I'm Jerry Simotis. I'm with Veterans for Peace. I'd like to promote peace on a massive scale using the social media.
Hi, my name is Andrew Sather. As Seth already said, I'm monitoring Twitter tonight. I also work for a small private nonprofit law library down the street, and I have the This American Life iPhone app, which makes me an expert.
That'll work.
Hi, I'm Mark Rivez, and I have very limited experience with audio also, and just want to learn.
Hi, I'm Mike Fagans, philstories.org. I collect stories, digital video, and put them online. And I like to do stories like This American Life as well.
Hi, I'm Harold Pugh. I work here at the American Friends Service Committee. Play around with a little bit of audio and stuff, but I'm looking forward to hearing and learning from our wonderful panelists here.
Hello, Joe Rosato. This is actually the second time that I've been here. I'm involved with IT and theater, and my connection to audio is just that I worked at a theater and have designed sound many times. So.
Hi, my name is Lamar Kendrick, and please don't ask me if I've ever heard of Kendrick Lamar. and for those of you who haven't, you can Google him. My name doesn't appear anymore. It used to be. Now I can go back to total obscurity. Because mine is like his is like 1 through 999,000, you know. A regular attendee here, and I'm interested in creating community online and off. My day job is evaluating projects on behalf of some investors, but at heart I'm a community developer and have been for a very, very long time.
Hi, my name is Louise Salinas, and I work in this building in a Quaker organization called the Friends World Committee for Consultation Section of the Americas. And we're the association of all the Quaker meetings or Friends meetings in churches in North, South, and Central America and the Caribbean. And we do not do much in the way of audio. And what I'm interested in learning is what are best practices for audio posting? How long should they be? What about the content? I really could use some guidelines in that, and also the technical side. Like, how do you do it? I mean, in like a 1, 2, 3 kind of thing, or if not, knowing where to go to do that. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Viv Hawkins. I work with the Shalom Center. Rabbi Arthur Waskow is a natural to be featured in this kind of way, and I've been greatly impressed with the work that Madeline's done on a number of interviews. So I think that I'm here for Seth and Madeline are probably going to be delighted with others of you. I'm about to enter into a project that will include interviewing people, mostly to collect stories that have to do with their spiritual experiences. And I could see many of those stories being of value to post and be available more widely. So that's what I'm here for, to learn what I can, and grateful for your being here as well.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Greising. I write, speak, and teach about values and work. Sometimes I work with extraordinary individuals who are also thinking about values and work, particularly bringing their values to what they do every day. I just happened to get on Twitter this morning an audio feed from a good friend of mine, and for the first time in a very long time, I was blown away by the power of a short audio message, as opposed to just reading a little clip visually. It was just a whole different experience. So I'm really looking forward to what you have to say about it.
Hi, I'm David Saul. I'm with Omicron Development, which is an IT consulting firm. We consult to both profit and nonprofit organizations. But in a previous life, I used to work in the broadcast industry for a lot of years. In fact, if you go way back and you remember the old Geeter with the Heater, I used to do the audio for his TV show at Channel 29 years and years ago. So I've built a number of television stations and radio stations and worked in that industry. And now I feel like a real dinosaur because I know all that old technology, but I've been just worrying about IT infrastructure since then. So I'm going to find this very interesting.
Okay, thank you all. We obviously have a diversity of folks in here. Before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to Steve, but I wanted to mention one thing, which is that we had talked to the Prometheus Radio Project about coming, and one of the things that is relevant here is that there's a very timely opportunity here, which is that the Local Community Radio Act of 2010 was the most recent one, freed up a bunch of licenses and airwaves, which are going to be dispensed in the middle of October. And the Prometheus Radio Project is assisting nonprofits, local nonprofits, in applying for those licenses and being able to use them. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to be able to get free, legitimate FM bandwidth licenses. And so the Prometheus Radio Project has something on its website. The URL is there. It's also on the back of your tag. And they want people to be able to contact them by the month of June. So it's very timely in order to get their support in applying for this this opportunity. So if you, after going through this, feel like your organization or an organization you know about would like to possibly apply for such a license, then by all means, go to their website. Saying that.
That's the live stream's coming through.
Oh, that's because okay. Would you mute that laptop, please? So I switched the laptop. So that was me again. Just really emphasizing the point. So there's the website. So you can feel free to go to it and take advantage of that opportunity if that appeals to you. That'll be done. Okay. Enough of that. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Steve, and he will kick us off.
Thanks, Seth. Is the mic working? Does it sound like it's working? Yeah, okay. So for those of you who have been here before, I'm Steve Lubetkin, Podcast Steve on Twitter. My background, very long ago, almost as long ago as the Geeter with the Heater, but not quite. I worked in college radio and then went on to commercial radio back in the days when editing was done with a grease pencil and a razor blade on magnetic reel-to-reel tape, and probably, I don't know, have any of the panelists had the pleasure? You have. Good. Okay. That's good. It's good skill. You know, I mean, you go into a radio station today and they have reels of tape, right? No.
Yeah, actually, well, yeah.
So, but I've been told repeatedly that I have a face for radio, and I don't disagree. My love for radio never went away in the 30 years I spent being a corporate PR guy. And when I went out on my own in 2004 and was looking around for a way to niche myself, podcasting seemed to be a logical place to position because I saw it as a real opportunity for people to do the radio thing without having the expense of having a broadcasting tower and transmitters and licenses, and you also have a global reach. Now, there was a time when folks who did what Peter does didn't have that luxury. They had a limited broadcast area, which was the reach of their transmitter output. Now, with the internet, they can expand their audience, as can you. And it's, I think, a very powerful tool for organizations to use to tell the stories, precisely the stories that you all were describing. The panel that we've assembled turns out, sort of by accident rather than design, to be a really useful panel for the kinds of things that you've indicated you're interested in. There are two of us on the panel who I regard as sort of really good with the toys and the technical stuff, and two people on the panel who are fabulous with the content piece. I don't pretend to be fabulous with the content piece. I've learned a lot in the last 8 years about the tools to use, and we can show you some tools tonight ranging from very modestly priced tools up to some relatively expensively priced tools, depending on the budgets that you have and the finances that you have at your disposal. That would be me, and at the far end, Whitney Hoffman, who is the producer of the LD podcast, which is a podcast for people who have need for information about learning disabilities. She is also a member of the PodCamp Foundation Board, which is the overseeing organization for the PodCamp. You may have seen PodCamp Philly and PodCamp East. There's also one in Boston. There's one in Washington. They've been around the world, but more recently getting bigger and more regional in nature. To Whitney's left is Peter Crimmins, who's the arts and culture reporter for WHYY and newsworks.org, and he has extensive experience in broadcasting and putting together the kinds of stories that you're all interested in hearing about. And to my right is Madeline Schaefer, who is a fellow here at the American Friends Service Committee. She grew up in Philadelphia, and it says in her bio that she was surrounded by Quakers of all shapes and sizes. And perhaps she'll tell us about the different shapes and sizes. But she looked for stories in other places, and just like Russell Conwell with his famous Acres of Diamond speech, she came home and found the richest stories right in her backyard. So she's back here, and she's producing audio programs for the AFSC website. And if you haven't listened to some of the stories that she's produced, they're really wonderful. They're a joy to listen to from the way they're produced and the quality of the production. So we'll have an opportunity to hear how she goes about doing that. What I thought I would do is start with some just real basic show and tell about the kinds of tools you might want to consider if you're just starting out and you're brand new. I wonder if I can reach this. Let's see if we can make it move. Oh, look, it does move. This is what the sound engineers hate, is when the talent plays with the equipment.
We hate that.
I know. So, right, don't touch the toys. That's how all those people who go in the bathroom with the wireless mics get in trouble, because they didn't turn the mute button on, even though they should have. So I've got a couple of slides, but I also have some show and tell that I brought with me. And I wonder if Harold can pop it up on the screen. Wonderful. Great. So real quickly, just for those of you who don't know, we have to tip our hats to these two guys in the picture. Dave Weiner, who created the technology we call the RSS feed, and Adam Curry, the former MTV VJ. He was one of the last people on MTV to actually play music, who collaborated with Weiner to come up with the enclosure tag. And without getting into a lot of technical stuff, it's the enclosure tag in RSS that allows you to send a podcast to people without sending them a big fat audio file. We've been hanging MP3 files on websites since the early days of the web, but the definition of a podcast is an audio file or a video file that's distributed using RSS technology. And that's the technology. Does everybody know what RSS is? Anybody who doesn't? It's basically, RSS is one of those great acronyms in the technology industry. Those of you who have scanners are probably familiar with the acronym TWAIN, as in Twain Compatible Scanner. That's a wonderful one because it means technology without an impressive name. And along the same lines, RSS stands for, depending on who you talk to, really simple syndication, really simple something else. There's another one that people define. But basically what it means is that if you put content on a web page that is enabled with RSS, anytime that content changes, the RSS, which is sort of like shadowing the page, changes as well. And people can tell their software or browser or Google Reader to watch that RSS feed, we call it, And if it changes, they get alerted to the change. And the change comes to them in the metaphor of a new email or a new alert. So they know that there's something new to look at or to listen to.
Right,
And,
it allows subscription. So.
thank you. So that's really, you know, the genesis of all of this. Producing them can be really done on a shoestring. I brought this one with me. I have it on a lanyard, which I've gotten tangled in the next show and tell, the microphone. Oh, this is good. This is called unrehearsed, folks. Okay, so for the benefit of the camera, this is just a little stereo audio recorder. It has a jack for a microphone, which is nice, but it has built-in microphones, so if you're sitting really close, you can talk to each other. But if you are doing an interview with someone and you want to sit at a comfortable distance, you get a couple of lavalier microphones like this one here that I have all tangled up. Okay, so I'm getting there.
First thing you learn about audio production, cord management.
Yeah, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Obviously, I'm lacking in that department.
And bring the Velcro strips for
The
you.
advantage of using a thing like this is it has a built-in USB connector. So when you're done with your recording, you plug it right into your computer, and you can copy the files off of this onto the computer. Now, it does a great job with stereo, which can come in very handy when you're producing the kind of content that our other panelists are producing, because you want the sound, the ambient sound of the environment where the program is being recorded to be part of the story. But when you're doing the interview, you can isolate the people that you are talking to. We'll get to that. With one of these. Now, this is a lavalier microphone that has two microphones and a stereo jack, which plugs into the microphone jack on the stereo recorder. And what you get there is you have the interview subject and the interviewer on separate channels. So when you're producing the finished product, you can edit more easily. One of the problems that you'll have as you're beginning your editing, your interviewing career, is you're going to tend to step on the words of the person you're talking to. And if you do that on the same audio recording, you can't really separate it easily. So putting them on separate tracks can be helpful. Go back. So, if you want to go up the food chain a little bit, there are more expensive audio recorders like the Marantz that's pictured. This one has been superseded by newer models, but the concept is the same. It records on a flash card, a compact flash, like you put in your cameras. The newer ones record on SD cards. They record a lot of time. You can record hours and hours of audio without having to worry about carrying tapes. It's delightful. It just makes life a lot easier. This one is more expensive. This one is about $500. This one is about under $100, I'll say. There are others in between. Whitney has a couple that are similar in nature. They're
The H1 by Zoom. This runs about $100. It's nice. It's got something called XY. Sorry, it's got something called XY mic configuration, so you get a rounder sound. And this is handy because it also lets you put it on top of a video camera or whatever else, so it's good for extra audio here. This one's a little bit of a pain because it runs on micro SD cards, so you have to put it in a bigger card before you put it in the computer. This is the H2 Zoom. This also works that way. This has nice little things other than it looks like a little guy wearing a hat. You can change the mic configuration and where you're going to get the best sound and everything on the top, which is very handy. It records quite a lot of audio, again, with an SD card, runs on AA batteries. It is terrific. You can do MP3, which is very convenient if you're going to post podcasts, or you can do it in other formats and then convert everything to MP3 afterwards. So that's really handy. And then if anybody's interested, there are little things now like you'd think I ran for Zoom, but it's just because I use some Roland equipment that I used to hate. But this is essentially what used to be like a flip cam with a Zoom audio setup on top. So, the flip cameras and your iPods and everything else will take video or take audio, but because they don't really have good microphones, oftentimes it sounds like crud. And one of the first things that you will learn about audio is having really good source audio with a minimal amount of background sounds will make you a lot happier, because trying to remove sounds of air conditioners or other things becomes a nightmare. One of the first mistakes I made podcasting was trying to record something just through, I'll just use the recording software on my computer. Well, what happens is when you're doing a Skype interview or you've got your computer on and it's trying to run the recording stuff, the fan kicks on, particularly in laptops. And then after a while, all you hear is, whoo. And it's like, oh yeah, that's great. I'm never going to get that out of there. So yeah. So be careful about that. Having learned the hard way.
One of the most common misconceptions, I think, among people first starting out is the idea that, oh, I can record on my computer, and going ahead and doing that. The same thing for almost anything. If you try to record a long, like a seminar or a conference on a computer, it's almost guaranteed that at some point during that program the computer's going to crash because it's got too many things running in the background. It's always best to use a dedicated recording device for something really important. Particularly if it's a one-off thing where it's not going to happen again. If an interview you can always redo, but
Yes, but there's nothing more embarrassing than having to call somebody back and going, guess what, I screwed up the recording of the audio. Will you give me another hour of your time?
Exactly. So if you want to go further up the food chain, and this one is actually not much more expensive than the Marantz, I have a client that tends to do a lot of seminar panels with multiple speakers. They'll have like 6 or 7 speakers on a panel. And trying to edit audio where 6 or 7 microphones are mixed into a single channel or 2 channels is dicey at best. In particular, what happens in a conference setting is all the mics for the PA system are on at the same time, and the mix includes the shuffling of papers, the drinking of water, the whispering between panelists who can't be heard by the audience in the room, but it does come out on the recording. So what I found was, and it's from the same family as the recorders that Whitney was just showing, it's the Zoom R24, which can also be used if any of you are into music production. This can be used for recording simultaneously 8 channels, 8 separate channels. So it's really nice if you have multiple people that are going to be talking within a panel, whether you have, an interview panel of 3 or 4 people or a seminar with a full-blown panel of up to 8 people. You can record each one of them on a separate microphone, and then when you get into post-production, you have an individual audio track for each mic. So you can turn all the others down and focus on the person who's talking, and it just makes it a much better kind of recording. Yes, sir? It's called the Zoom R24.
Can it record? It's not a mixer, it records?
It's a mixer and a recorder. It has a lot of bells and whistles that I don't even use. Like I say, if you're into sound production, it will record up to 24 channels. You can bounce 8 channels 3 different times. So it's very versatile. It's not terribly expensive. It's about $500. And if you go to, I think it's zsounds.com, they have one of those multi-payment plans where you can pay like 4 equal payments, and they'll ship it to you before you finish paying for it.
Well, and also check out eBay, because it's oftentimes people will buy this sort of gear
and then give up.
Get,
yeah.
It's done with the project, and then they want to get rid of it. So I've gotten great gear off of eBay. So don't discount eBay, and unfortunately pawn shops, but I will always do them through eBay because, I'm not that kind of girl. But anyway, I've got the R16, which is sort of the little brother of this, that I think runs around $300 or $400. And it runs with an SD card that's really convenient. It's got 4 channels, but it will bounce up to 16. And the thing that's great about it is it will record independently, but it's wicked portable. So unlike a lot of big mixers, this is very light, and it will run on batteries.
Yes.
So if you are doing anything out in the field, you want to do something, at your kid's soccer game or whatever, you could even bring this along if that was important.
Okay. Yes, they're XLR, or it's XLR or 1/4 inch.
Yeah,
you can use both. Okay, so, and then, you can also do the wireless mic thing. The Shure and the Sennheisers, which tend to be the industry standards for broadcast wireless microphones, are frightfully expensive. Voco Pro, which is a company best known for karaoke equipment, actually makes this. It's called the UHF 8800. And this is a single box that has receivers for 8 wireless microphones. And they are modular, which is nice because as I found out the first time I tried to use it, there's an enormous amount of interference in the wireless mic frequency ranges. And if you move around at all, if you go from, one side of Philly to New Jersey, you will find differences in what interference you encounter. To the point where I was having this interference on one microphone, I called them up and they said, "What zip code are you in?" I said, "Why does that matter?" They said, "It makes a big difference." When I told them, they said, "Oh, yeah, there's a problem with that," and they shipped me a new module on a different frequency, a new microphone and a module, which is what's nice about it. You just swap out these little modules, and you get a different frequency. But it's very convenient to have wireless mics because you're not running cables. So there are lower cost options for wireless mics. I don't know if you guys use wireless mics much, because the nature of what you do, you don't have to. I often tend to be at the back of the room in a conference room, and it's a lot easier to set up than to try to snake wires under the chairs, because whenever you tell people, even if you tape it down, don't trip on the wires, they always trip on the wires. That's like suggesting it to them. Okay, so for editing, the nice thing about editing podcasts is there is a free product out there, and it's a multi-platform product called Audacity. This is a multi-channel editing suite. It's been around for a few years. I know, Whitney, you probably used it.
I love Audacity. I still love Audacity.
I used it. Yeah, it's relatively easy to use. It's free. The price is right. The thing that I found about Audacity, and people can challenge me if they like, it creates temporary files that blow up very large, that you don't even know about unless you start hunting around in the folders underneath.
Oh, yes, the .back.au.
Yeah. I found it was creating really large files, and the more complicated the podcast got, the larger the temporary, the behind the scenes files got. So, and it also it was a little bit limiting in some of the things that it could do, and I moved on to some other tools. But for most people, this is all you'll ever need. You can lay in multiple tracks of audio. You can have, you can have a music bed. You can have intros and outros. You can edit. You get really, really good at looking at the visualization of the sound file, to where you can actually identify the ums and the ahs by looking at them after a while. And it's very easy to edit them out.
It's like the Microsoft Word, basically, of audio editing. And, you never realize how many little audio ticks you have until you start editing your own audio for a while and listen to how many times you say, or whatever catchphrase you have that's your mental spacer while you catch up to what you want to say next. So knowing what that looks like after you've done it 32 times so you can go and just click it out makes editing really fast.
So this is just an example of a stereo file. There's a screenshot from the Audacity website. It's audacity.soundforge.net if you want to go download it. SourceForge. Did I say SourceForge? Yeah, SourceForge. SourceForge. And all of the information you need is there. Like I say, multi-platform. You can run it on Mac. You can run it on Linux. It runs on Windows. And you can get really good files out of it very quickly. So that's probably your best choice.
It's also a very good trick, because if you get audio files that aren't in MP3, Audacity has the tools to convert them into MP3s. Let's say you've got somebody who recorded it in the Windows Media Player thing and you need to convert it. Audacity has those tools available. So that can be really handy if you've got things that aren't compatible.
When I was getting ready for tonight, I thought I would mention two of my favorite plug-in tools for enhancing sound, and I discovered that they're both sort of defunct. The one on the left is called SoundSoap Pro. It was from a company called Bias Sound, and it turns out that Bias is out of business. There are still places, including eBay and Amazon, where I think you can buy this plug-in, and this is an audio plug-in, but what it does is it really does magic with noisy sound files. So if you have a situation where you can't help but record in a very noisy environment, a program like SoundSoap can clean it up very effectively. There's some other companies still on the market. There's one called iZtope, IZTOPE, which sells a number of different sound processing tools. Do you have any that you particularly like that you use? Or
I usually use Pro Tools.
Pro Tools?
That has a lot of built-in plugins. Pro Tools is very expensive.
Right.
I grew up with it. I trained on it, so I stayed with it. But it has built-in.
Most of it, we're bootstrapping here. So the other one on the right, the Lavalier, you can still get it. It's just not being further developed. The group that put that together was the Conversations Network, which is a podcasting network that has sort of gone sort of dark. But what the Lavalier will do for you is something that everyone should probably try to learn how to do if you're doing audio, and that is to normalize the total audio file. Invariably, you're going to have some things recorded at different volumes from the other elements of your program. And when you put them all together, and this is a typical characteristic of some of the more amateur podcasts, is the person will be talking in the studio and say, and now let's go to the story I recorded with, Peter, and all of a sudden the sound gets really soft. And you crank it up on your iPod or your MP3 player, and then all of a sudden it comes back to the studio and your eardrums go, woo. What the Lavalier does for you in one pass is it looks at the file and it averages everything out, and it gives you a really nice, even, this is a before and after in Audacity. It just makes the sound file much more even, so that you're not having those wide fluctuations in volume, and it just sounds a little bit more professional. But you can still download that.
I'm doing an interview where I've recorded people, let's say, on a Zoom, so they're really all on one channel and they're not mic'd separately, so I can't edit or level everything separately. What I'll do is I'll toss the audio file into the Lavalier to start out with, so everybody is sort of at the same volume before I edit it. Where, if you've got everybody on a different channel, you might want to level it at the end. So it's just sort of a before or after kind of thing. Because otherwise, again, there's, it's like when you're watching TV and the commercial comes on and it's 4 times as loud. There's nothing worse than trying to, you've got somebody who's got a mousy voice and then somebody else who's clearly, been trying out for a Broadway show in the same room. And it can be just awful to try and get that to work well otherwise.
So the other option, for those of you who have signed up for Adobe for the Creative Cloud, anybody here? Okay. A lot of people think it's a bad idea. I happen to think it's a really good idea. Adobe is moving to a new licensing model where instead of you buying the software and paying thousands of dollars at one time and then next year you upgrade and it's another $600, you pay a monthly fee and you get access to everything. So for those of us who do photography and video and audio, it's a pretty great deal because for somewhere between $20 and $50 a month, depending on your initial price, you get everything in the Adobe suite, including Adobe Audition, which is at the high end of sort of what Peter's talking about with the Pro Tools. A lot of bells and whistles for audio production. A lot of people think this one is a good program to use. And then I would add to that, if you have video software, some of the video packages are perfectly good at producing audio. And I've had some great success recently producing audio podcasts using Sony Vegas, which is a video editing program. It has all the bells and whistles you need for the audio enhancement and the editing. It's very easy to use. It looks a lot like Audacity in terms of the sound files and the way they look. And editing is just really, really easy. You can do the same thing in Final Cut, which is on the right. So there are a lot of different options for how you do the editing. You may need a mixer. We can talk about mixers if you're interested, but that's basically, you put all the microphones in and you can put them on different channels and so forth.
They have a lot of twiddly knobs.
A lot of knobs to twiddle, exactly. A couple of years ago, I picked up some proof points for why people should be thinking about podcasting as an organization. The people who listen to podcasts are already predisposed to getting their messages online. The statistics suggest that they are about a third more likely to have made an online purchase. Most of them buy music online. They're comfortable with the concept of downloading an MP3 file. They spend a lot of time online, and they actually click on the ads. So that was a few years ago. This fellow was talking to the Financial Times. I thought it was worth just mentioning if you need to convince somebody why podcasting might be useful to you. We have a white paper on our website you can download, which lists a lot of these tools. I neglected to mention my good friend Todd Maffin, who is a podcaster and inspirational speaker on the West Coast in Canada.
Yeah, he used to work for the CBC.
Todd is he has written a couple of books about producing for public radio, but some of the lessons that he teaches in the book's called From Idea to Air, and it's got some really good basic tips on how to produce compelling content. And one of the biggest things I picked up from it was the concept of what he calls room tone. And that is, if you're out at the farm interviewing the dairy farmer, you want to make sure that you record some sounds in the barn of the cows walking back and forth or the milking machines working, so that you can use that as a bed for your story later on, because it sounds very jarring if you go from the interview with the farmer on the farm to you in the studio with no sound behind you. It's the ambient sound of the environment that helps tell the story. So, this is worthwhile to take a look at as well.
And actually, once you've got your gear like these portable audio recorders, I've compiled over time sound carts when I've been at really interesting and weird places. I've got background sound from when my kids were at park, and sounds of, a stagecoach going through Sturbridge Village when we were visiting there, and airlines taking off and on. And the whole speech and whatever, because, while I'm not necessarily producing stories or anything that I want to use those for, I want to be able to have them because it's stuff that would go well, whether you're doing a fiction story or audio or telling something else. And sometimes it's just fun. I teach podcasting in an after-school program for the Kennett School District a couple times a year. They've got this After the Bell program, and I'll pull up those audio and try and just get kids to learn to listen with their ears and actually listen to the sound and try and identify it. And that's kind of fun too, because it really is teaching them to be more aware of background noise. And it's one of the things, once you start producing audio, you really become very aware of ambient noise almost everywhere where you are.
So what I'd like to do now is move to the content side. If people have questions, feel free. But what I'd like to do is ask Peter to give us a little bit of an introduction to what he does, how he puts stories together at HYY.
Sure. Actually, I do two things that might be of interest. One of them is I make stories for HYY for broadcasts. I also am the recorder and editor of a podcast for the art blog, theartblog.org, which is a local art blog. And it's run by these two ladies, Roberta and Libby, who interview local artists. And I record them and I edit it, which is very, very different from what I do on the radio. And they made me realize something that I think is important to consider, for you to consider. For my job, I make radio. I make radio for a general listening audience. When you put something out into the air, anyone could be listening, and so you have to make it for literally anyone. If you make a podcast, you have to assume that you're going to have an audience who has a certain base of knowledge and a certain background that they're bringing to the table already. So you have to play to that audience that you're trying to get. You're not playing to everyone in the city. So we would do this art block thing, and I would record these things. It's a complicated setup. I can describe how I do it if you want. And I would edit it, and they would record like a 45-minute interview. I would edit it down to 15 minutes, and I would send it to them, and they would listen to it before it went up on the website. And they would say, we talked about, I seem to recall that during the interview we talked about like technical stuff. Like they would ask the artist, what kind of camera do you use? Or what kind of, paints do you use? What's your brushing technique? And I would cut that out because it's not very interesting to me. I mean, I don't care what kind of camera you use. But they said, no, our podcast is for artists who will be listening and they want to know these kinds of things. So I had to go back and put it back in. And it drove home the point that you really have to know what you're trying to accomplish and who you're trying to talk to and play to that person. You can do that with podcasts much more than you can on the radio. You can know who your audience is, and you can bring that to it. I wanted to play, let's see if I can do this. One of the things we're doing at HYY the last couple of years is we launched this website called newsworks.org. Well, that's not it. Anyway, whatever. Newsworks. So everything we do on this isn't Newsworks. This is SoundCloud. Everything we do on the air, we have to do it online too. And that brings up, it's a whole different kind of way of thinking. And so when you make audio for broadcast and when you make audio for online. So we the last 18 months, we've been sort of rethinking what we do. And so what I want to do is I want to play you a story, an audio story that went on the air, that was broadcast on, on 90.9, 91.9. If I can find it. Where's the, oh, here it is. And then I want to play you something that I put up on Twitter using the same sound, but very different. Let's do this one. It's kind of short. Kind of a Mac person, so I don't know how to do this one. Okay, I'll give you a little preamble. This was produced a couple weeks ago. It was a local experimental dance troupe that went around Philadelphia doing these sort of pop-up dances. It'll explain in the thing, in the story, but that's enough.
3 dancers from the Miller Rock Line group had spread out on Independence Mall in Philadelphia with signs around their necks saying, "Fly with me."
All right. That was a little thing.
The bus accelerating at the end.
When you're recording on the street, things like buses are really kind of fun. They're really useful. Traffic, because they punctuate. If you want to separate if someone says something and it's really basically 2 ideas that they strung together, you run a bus between the 2 of them, and then it's sort of it's a comma. It puts like a little comma there. A lot of sound is really good for punctuation if you're doing live stuff. And that was a little, actually the mic work on that was a little weird because I recorded interviews with them on the street, which is standard. You stand in front of them, you hold a microphone, and you ask them questions. And then I wanted to record the 2 people talking while they danced together, one of them holding a cell phone playing Alicia Keys out of the thing. And so I sort of shadowed them as they spun around, holding the microphone between their mouths with the cell phone. So a microphone is here, they're talking here, and someone's holding the cell phone here. So in that line, what the microphone is, I'm using a directional microphone. I'm picking up the music and their voices with one mic. So mic placement is really kind of important. But also, I knew that it was an Alicia Keys song, and you can download that for $1. And I recorded. I didn't stop. I never hit stop when they were dancing to the song. So I got the entire Alicia Keys song, And then I went back to the studio to my computer. I downloaded Alicia Keys, paid $1 for it, and just synced it up. So I got the crappy Alicia Keys sound that came out of a cell phone recorded in the middle of the street, and the clean Alicia Keys song. And I sort of mixed them together so that it sounds richer because you have the original, but it still sounds like it's in the street because you have that thing. So that was kind of neat. But
So how long does it take to produce a piece?
About an afternoon. That took an afternoon. To go out and record it, come back, and put it out there. I interviewed 4 people. I didn't use the 4th. And you pulled, about 20 seconds out of each one. So that went out over the air. And part of the trick these days is to get people online to connect with your content. So I like to think of these kind of things as there's layers of platforms. WHYY has a tremendous radio platform. It's powerful. A lot of people listen to it. And we want to layer that with a website, which is Newsworks. We want to layer that with Twitter. We want to layer that with Facebook. And so it's really important if you're going to put out a podcast, for example, make a great podcast, put it out there. But then you have to draw people in through social media to that podcast. And I would not recommend putting that podcast out on Twitter. You can crunch it down into a tiny little MP3 and you can tweet it out. But I don't think anyone's going to listen to a 20-minute podcast on Twitter. It's my take on things. So what I did with this is I wanted to put this, it was about a 2-minute story, and I wanted to put it out on social media, but I didn't want to put that sound on social media because I didn't think it would work on a social media platform. So I recut it and I remixed it into something else. And I put it on SoundCloud, which is this. This is SoundCloud. SoundCloud is neat because it's like YouTube for sound. And you can create a file and you can embed it into anything. You can embed it into your tweet. You can't really do that in a lot of other platforms, so it's handy. It also gives you, hold on a second, a picture. Sort of. Can I slide this over somehow? Anyway, it's sort of cut off a little bit there, but that's the woman with the sign around her neck that says "Dance with Me," and there's a man standing next to her. You can attach a picture to any kind of sound you have, so you get a little multimedia thing. And so I made this. How long is this? Oh, it's also 2 minutes. And I did not put my voice is not on this. So there is no narrative. I'm not explaining what's happening. I'm relying on the voices to do it, and it's a little different. See if it works. Oh, it's not going to work. And
sometimes SoundCloud gets really
fussy.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not going to work.
Well, just out of curiosity, do you think it's the 2 different audiences? Is this the reason why you decided to remix it? Or is it telling the story in a different way?
I think it's I like to keep aware of how people are receiving this. What are they doing? When you're listening to the radio, chances are you're in your car. When you're listening to a podcast, I think podcasts reach people that radio doesn't. You're running, like you are. I listen to podcasts when I'm at the gym. People listen to podcasts in a whole different areas. People listen to this. I tweeted this. People listen to Twitter when they're standing in line, when they're distracted, when they have some time to kill and they want to catch up. And they don't want to spend a lot of time, and they don't want to be preached at, and they don't want to be. It's much more passive. Twitter's much more passive. So you kind of have to hook them, sometimes at the expense of delivering your entire message. And this is,
Are you looking at your statistics and seeing what the difference is or what the different...
Right now, my SoundCloud stuff does not get a lot of hits.
Okay.
I have not been entirely successful with that.
No. Yeah, sometimes SoundCloud and specific SoundCloud pages get really funky.
Yeah.
That's a disadvantage of SoundCloud.
Yeah, it doesn't seem
Well,
to be
and I've
happening
got
right
other
now.
friends, like CC Chapman, who's a big social media expert, uses SoundCloud for doing sort of quick little messages, and then he embeds it on a widget on his blog. So it sort of is, audio commentary that's going and sort of like a quick little podcast hit that goes right along with his blog, and it's handy for that.
Doesn't want to play.
Yeah, it embeds really well and very easily, and it looks nice.
Yeah, one guy who, and I think he's in Florida. No, he's in Washington. He's a radio reporter, and he's making a name for himself by being the guy who reports entirely with his iPhone. He records, he takes pictures, he edits, he releases all from his iPhone. And he has all these tricks. And one of them is SoundCloud, because you can... I sort of try to mimic one of the things in one of my stories. This is about, again, you can't really see the picture very well on the screen because it's a little bit cut off. Yeah, unfortunately. There it is. So one of the things is, see this picture? There are 3 pictures in it. I did not, and when there's an app you can get called PicArt, I think it's called, where you can make 3 or 4 pictures into one picture. Because SoundCloud gives you one image. You can attach one image to your sound. Here, actually, you can attach 3 because you can compress 3 images into one image and make that your SoundCloud image. And then you have a certain amount of text that you can include. Well, I don't have it up right now, but there's a text field. So you can have 3 pictures, you can have a minute and a half of sound, and you can have about 200, 300 characters of text. And it's all tweetable. It all fits in. And plus, you have 100 characters of tweet that you can add to that. So it's a really compact way to get a whole lot of information into a very small box and send it out into the world.
What is that software called?
The visual software? Sound is SoundCloud, but there's another app, I think it's called PicArt, that lets you put a whole bunch of, create a photo montage into a single frame.
There's a bunch of different apps available, I know, certainly on the Mac, because I've got 2 or 3 of them that I have on my iPad where I can stitch a bunch of things together into sort of composites and stuff, and it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Another way to waste time when you're sitting there.
I wonder if I have, here, let me see if I can play you something else.
I'm just really intrigued by what you're talking about in terms of different audiences, because I know that when I'm talking to nonprofit clients, oftentimes when we're even talking about their social media message or their email marketing or anything else, we talk to them about trying to divide things up based on their audience, because you may want one set of information to go out, let's say, to your donors.
Okay, so
another
right
set of
now
information.
we are in
Oops.
the independent small area.
See, I got it to work on this.
Across from the Liberty Bell.
Yeah, let me see if we can plug it in.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it? Ooh.
So, again,
Right
what are
here.
you doing? You've got another message that goes to your volunteers and then another message to the people that you're serving or whatever else. You've got 3 different audiences. So if you're thinking about doing podcasts, think about who you want to listen to and who not, because there may be different messages for different people. If you're, let's say, down in Delaware,
So hopefully
United
that
Cerebral
in
Palsy
the independent
deals
small
with people
areas.
that you wouldn't necessarily think about. I always
That's
think
not
about
working.
little kids who need physical therapy, but they actually do a lot of elder care and other things as well. And so in order to reach that, is there a way to do all of your communications, including podcasts or videos or whatever, so it reaches that additional audience that people may not automatically think to you about? Or is there, something that you could put out once a month to your volunteers or whatever, and they know to listen to this, and that's going to be their updates? And sometimes voice communications is a lot more personal and a lot more engaging, and can get your point across a lot better than some other email where by the 3rd line or whatever I'm like, yeah, I've got to do something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I grew up in, I didn't grow up, but I used to live in the Bay Area in San Francisco. I ran a radio show there for years about cinema. And people often, about the difference between using sound and voice and printed material. Sound really sticks in your brain more. If you get them to listen to it, that's the big trick. If you can get people to listen to your voice or your message, it does stick in their head much better than print, for whatever reason.
Studies to prove it.
I mean, yeah, I guess some people have studied that. So that's one of the reasons why it's a really good idea to do things like podcasts or sound things, because people who listen to it will remember it much more than they will your text. Mm-hmm.
Please.
Okay, so this may be one of those really simple, stupid questions, but can you tell us, can someone explain the difference between a podcast and just putting a couple of minutes of sound bites on your website? Like, what's the difference?
I'll try that. A podcast is usually something that's, well, there's a lot of differences, but I think the main one is podcast is something you do regularly. You put it out every week, every month. It's a show that recurs, and people expect to hear it again in a different version of it. You can put sound bites. Yeah, you can put sound bites on your website, and it'll stay there, and it will never change. Podcasts change all the time, and it's new information. It's new people, new voices. I think that's the. I mean, there are technical reasons, but I think that's the main one.
Well, absolutely, and I think, having been podcasting since now, 2005, 2006, which seems like the coon's age now. I think a lot of people who were early podcasters kind of got burnt out and hung it up after a while, because once you start doing a daily show, and particularly if you're doing it for free or whatever, or even once a week, after a while it seems like a job. And when it started out as something you did because it was cool and it was a passion and it was a hobby, they don't know how to turn it on or turn it off. But I think there are other show models like the BBC that puts out a limited edition, 10 episodes of this or that. And I think if you're thinking about doing audio, and particularly a podcast, thinking about how often to deliver, just so whatever you decide, as long as it's regular and people can anticipate it, that's better for building an audience, because we all want to watch, the Big Bang Theory Thursdays at 8 o'clock, right? Also, I know people earlier asked questions about length. Most of the time for podcasts, some of the research says, 20 minutes is good because that's about the length of an average commute. So depending on what information you have, that can be really helpful. Now, there are people that break the rules all the time because it's your show. You can do anything you want.
Oh, yeah. I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to do an hour-long show, and then I broke it down into 2 30-minute shows, because I found that I could continue the conversation. I could do, record about an hour, hour and a half of an interview, break it into 2 pieces, and then you could sort of put handles around each different idea, and people didn't get too tired listening to it. And plus, it meant less work for me in terms of producing stuff.
Well, I think part of it goes right to what Peter was saying before about the podcast for artists, where they wanted to hear the excruciating details of the technique. When you have an audience that's extremely passionate about the topic, or you have a topic that is of great importance to people at a time of need, then the length is going to be less important. And an example I can cite is a few years ago we were engaged by a social service agency in New Jersey to record a panel discussion about new forms of treatment for ovarian cancer. On the panel, they had a gynecologic oncologist, and my hope is that none of you ever have to meet one of these people, except socially. They had a nurse who was involved in doing genetic assessments of family risk for ovarian cancer, and they had 3 ovarian cancer survivors, people who had successfully been treated and were in remission/cure. But for people who had an interest in that topic, the topic was so compelling that even though the panel discussion and the Q&A was over 2 hours, and I know this goes outside the range of everyone's expectation of how long a podcast should be. We've had over 3,000 downloads of that podcast precisely because people who, God forbid, are in the need for information about ovarian cancer, they want everything they can get their hands on. And with bandwidth being much faster and the ability to store large files being what it is today, people are less concerned about the length if it's something that's of compelling importance. But, that's going to be the exception rather than the rule.
Right, and I think a lot of it is just really thinking about your audience. What would they want to listen to, and ask them. Ask your volunteers or your donors or people that you want to listen to. when I first did the LD podcast, I thought I was dealing with it for parents like me who had kids who had ADHD or other learning disabilities and really needed information, because otherwise, you always feel like you're living next door to the genius who's already applied to Harvard the moment they're born, and that your kid somehow is defective. So helping other parents get over that and talking to experts on the subject was fantastic. I was really surprised. I found out my audience was actually teachers and therapists and other people like that, who were listening to the experts and not who I thought the audience was. I remember, I had a couple episodes up for the first couple of weeks, and 17 people who were not my mother were listening to the show, and I was totally blown away. And then getting occasional emails from people in Hong Kong and all over the place. It's like, okay, if you put things up on the internet, people will listen and find them. And then that gets into a whole nother issue about SEO and putting up show notes and everything else that we can talk about as well. But I think part of it is, seriously, think about your audience and what you want to do. And again, think about, I tried to do shows that would go, there might be a theme. So, I do dyslexia right around National Dyslexia Week, and we do 2 or 3 shows in a row that were around that. I would put them out in that point in time, but I would tag them. So not everybody's going to listen to them the moment you put them out. But if you put them out where there's something seasonal or people are naturally going to be looking for more of that content on the web, you will get more natural hits and more natural traffic for it. But once you get something, if it's well done, some things are really evergreen. Ira Glass will pull out radio shows and rerun them on This American Life that he did 2, 3, 4 years ago, or bits of audio that they recorded a long time ago. And you can recycle things and keep things evergreen. So think about it too, how are you going to design the show so it's good for now, how topical is it, and then, what do you want to live there on a continuous basis over time?
We're going to go to the Twitter back channel. I think Andrew has somebody.
It's actually my own question.
Oh.
But we can pretend. I can tweet it, and then I'll ask it.
Okay.
It might be a good segue into SEO, actually, because Steve, you mentioned that 2-hour show. I'm really a big fan of making data-driven decisions. And the thing about a podcast is, once it leaves, the great halls of iTunes, or once it's downloaded via RSS, I don't know what parts of the show people listen to, what's interesting and what's not. And I see that almost as a nice attraction for like a hosted service, something like SoundCloud, where I imagine, I guess I don't know because I haven't used SoundCloud, but I imagine something like that maybe can give me those kind of stats where I can see that people actually listened to the first maybe 5 minutes of my 10-minute podcast, and maybe that podcast is too long. And I wonder if you can speak on that a little bit.
Well, I had an experience where I think asking people to listen to it is, just asking 10 people that to listen and give you their feedback is a good way to go. But I also had an experience of, I created a podcast. So I knew that I wanted to create a podcast. I knew that I wanted to tell stories, and I knew that I wanted to do it using audio. And but I knew that I couldn't just create content and put it on the internet, because who's going to listen to it? A lot of people were like, just put it on there. And so I'm like, you have to know who your audience is and who your community is and where they go online. So I created specifically for Quakers, and I created about a 45-minute podcast, and I created a few, like 3 or 4, and my mom listened to it and was like, Madeline, I just want something that's like 2 minutes, maybe something like NPR. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll try something different, shorter. And then I asked my other friend, or then I created it, and a few other people I talked to later were like, we really like the older stuff where you would string it all together and get it in a 45-minute length. So I realized at that point that it really, a lot of it depends on the person, but it also really, I think, primarily depends on the content itself, like you're saying, data-driven. But I think, I think asking people directly is probably the best way to go. But there might be actual tools aside from SoundCloud that I don't know about. Maybe you guys know.
One of the disadvantages, I think, that most of the folks in this room have is they're doing it for their own account. They're doing it for a nonprofit as a programmatic thing. Peter is sort of obligated to produce different types of content. You're sort of obligated to produce different types of content, so it's part of your job to make it into different shapes and sizes. Those of us who were doing it, huh?
For different platforms, like different content.
Adapting it like you did with the SoundCloud one, where it's different. It doesn't have a narration. So, it's really only limited, I think, by your willingness to keep re-editing it.
Well, and I don't think there is a really good tool the same way I think there's more data for YouTube in terms of how far in have people listened or watched than there really is. Yeah. Absolutely. I haven't dug into the stats. I'm doing a podcast called OBGYN to Go for Christiana Care, and we do education podcasts for medical residents. And we got an app because we signed up with Libsyn. You can go with Libsyn. They will let you do a little app, and for a certain amount a month, you can even let people purchase it through iTunes and everything else, and it's fantastic because you don't have to do any of the coding. And it can be on iPhones and Amazon and Androids and everything. It's fantastic and it's cheap. But again, so I don't know if there's additional metrics that go along with that where once you have the app, you can tell a little bit more of how many people are downloading it or not. But it's always the thing, if they've taken the trouble to download it, I look at that as a win, and then they can listen to it on their own accord. And as I'm sitting here with my iPad and 276 podcasts that I have yet to listen to, because I tend to be a binge listener, it's like, oh, good, I have to drive to my mother's 6 hours, nothing but, 4 hours of marketing over coffee, followed by fresh air, followed by, wait, don't tell me, so.
Another idea would be, maybe this is me. Another idea would be to create like a series, and then of a specific structure, with specific structure and length and whatever, and then try a five episode series, and then try a different kind of series with a different length, and see or not only different length but like a different structure, and see if one's more popular. It also could be dependent on what people. If it's touching on something that people are more interested in than something else. But that's another idea I just had.
The show Radio Lab, which is very popular, they only make a dozen shows a year or something, or a limited number. They don't do a show a week. They don't do not even 20 shows a year. I mean, they do a set. I mean, they plan out their season. Their season is maybe 15 or 16 episodes, and that's all they do. I mean, so they just think finite terms. They don't, and then they take a break and they do a lot of research, and then they come back with another batch of shows. So
they spend an enormous amount of time on editing and post-production.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of work, but they do it in batches. They don't spit it out every week like like Fresh Air will do every day. That's how they think about it in batches, which is one way to do it.
And I think it's keeping you from being exhausted if you think about it. This is Downton Abbey season 1, and we're going to binge and watch it all.
Yeah, right.
So
I want to give Madeline a chance to talk about her content, because she's done some really amazing content. How'd you get started with it?
Yeah, well, how I started, like I said, I came back to Philadelphia, and I had done radio in college in Minnesota, and had just really fallen in love with it. I think I'd always grown up listening to radio, but then I'd gone to college and got more involved with storytelling. There was a radio show there called the Carlton Radio Forum. Oh no, wait, it wasn't the Carlton Radio Forum. Something like that, something really dry. But it was basically like This American Life, but about, like the student life or whatever. And I got involved in that, and I got involved in the radio station. And then I came back to Philadelphia, and I also did some radio in New Zealand, and kind of was like all around thinking about, had all sorts of stories that I wanted to tell. And I came back and decided, again, that I needed an audience. And I knew that there are stories that Quakers were telling, or that Quakers had, that weren't being told through audio, or any other way, really, but print at that point. So I decided to create a podcast about Quakers and Quaker experience. And I was also interested in figuring out how to talk about spiritual issues, not issues, but spiritual matters, I guess, using audio, because I felt like it would be a really good platform, because you can get, without images, you are so much closer connected to ideas, At least I find that I'm much more engaged with ideas when the images aren't there, and with the people because I'm not distracted by their faces. And so I thought that audio would be a really good way to tell, spiritual stories, and not only tell spiritual stories, but, well, I guess just that, tell spiritual stories, not spiritual ideas, because I had read so much about spiritual ideas, and at the end of the day, there's only 3 things you need to know, So I was interested in creating spiritual content that was interesting and diverse and I guess kind of Quaker specific. So I created that, and that was a series again. And then I actually recently I've been doing it. So that's kind of an example of just creating a podcast and seeing how it goes. But I know that a lot of people, and I more recently have been trying to use audio to do as part of social justice campaigns. And it sounds like there's some people here that might be interested in doing that kind of thing. I think someone's here from the Veterans for Peace, and it would be really interesting to tell stories of different veterans and why they work for peace today. And I think that's an interesting story, It's an interesting topic, Is it enough to just share a story, Is that because I know there are a lot of people that tell immigrant stories, and there's this question of well, how many immigrant stories do you need to collect before you create change? Do you just collect stories and then there's policy change, or what's the connection exactly? Anyway, I'm sort of getting sidetracked. I wanted to first, if I could, play something, because you mentioned this. You mentioned this as a way of engaging young people, and I went to a Quaker middle school friends gathering, and I was Quakers love acronyms, and I was a FAP, which means a friendly adult presence. And I led a workshop on audio and audio recording. And so at the end of I gave them all recorders, and at the end of the gathering, I took all of that they'd recorded and I edited it into a little piece. Hopefully it's working. Hopefully SoundCloud's working. Oh.
Got to plug in the...
Sound loop.
This one?
Oh, I think the other one.
Yeah, closer one.
Yeah, that one.
Let's see. What? It's not what I wanted to have happen. Oh.
Can you get it on the pad?
I might be able to get it on here. It didn't work when I plugged it into the sound, so we might have to just stick a mic on it.
Oh.
What's...
It's just SoundCloud, and then I searched Madeline Schaefer.
Oh. All right, let's try.
Oh, well, does the plug won't work? Won't plug into your pad?
No, I tried plugging it in. So give us 1 second to bring up SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Oh, this makes exciting TV right on the web. So.
And this is another thing, which you all probably know. It's just,
Yeah, we'll just put the mic in front of it.
the way that you learn everything.
Yeah.
Which
There,
is why there's
right
something
here.
called post-production.
Let's see.
And while we're waiting, one thing I want to mention about Prometheus Radio, he mentioned that for the next month you can sign up for an FM band. That's a tremendous opportunity, which hasn't happened in America, I think, since the birth of radio. Having a low-power FM station, you have to maintain it, you have to put audio in it, you have to, it's a big project, but it's a tremendous opportunity to get a piece of real estate that no one has been able to get forever. So something to think about. It is a big responsibility because you have to feed it. You have to feed the beast, with sound 24 hours a day. But if you can pull it off, I'd recommend it strongly. Yeah, they're not giving you hardware. They're just giving you a piece of the air. You have to get a transmitter, and you have to do all of that, which you can do for $1,000 or something. I mean, it won't break your bank, but it is an expense.
And that's what Prometheus really helps you with, is getting all that set up.
Yeah.
1F.
1F.
I don't think.
No, I think you can get it as an individual. I think there's an application for that.
Yeah, you have have to be part of an organization.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Well, you have to at least be affiliated with an organization that's going to support you in doing it. A 501c3.
Well, but just think, there's really, I'm thinking of the Delaware Association of Nonprofits or whatever. There's really a great opportunity for somebody to decide to do nonprofit radio, get the license, and then just line up all the nonprofits in the community to commit to putting out an hour of radio a week. And if you get enough, you've got it covered.
I think we've got it.
Okay, it's
Did
kind
it
of
just
silly,
crash?
and we can just play.
It just
the beginning.
crashed. I don't believe it.
Well, anyway, another
Keep
thing
talking.
that I wanted to, I could just,
Stall.
Anyway, you can do cool things with sound.
The broadcasting sign.
What's that?
Stretch it out.
I can do that. Lots of tabs. Another thing that I worked on, or that I'm doing right now, and you realize there's just like so many things. You can share information on a podcast that people need to know, or you can tell stories about what's happening, like WHYY does, or you can have interviews with people that are interesting, that have written a book or something like that, or you can gather information.
I know that guy.
Esteban?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Marvelous. Used to work for the Marvelous.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Which is now in Baltimore, in West Philly.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. He, what was I saying? You can also collect information, like through oral histories, and that's what I'm doing right now. And that's Viv wanted to talk about this, but
I've got it.
I'll get back to this after we listen to this thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I like this groove.
And here's my question for you. How come the young friends get nachos for late night snack?
Because I love them.
What about us?
Like I said, I love them.
Yeah, I like this groove.
If you could be any
Oh, no, wait, actually.
You want
Play that.
magical creature, what would you be?
Unicorn.
Hippogriff. Hippogriff? What is that? I don't know, but it sounds cool.
A three-horned bunny unicorn.
Well, what's one of those things like half horse, half human, like cars?
Yeah.
Ooh. I'd be a dragon. And maybe I'd be one of those dragons that has like jewels and like gold.
A jewel-encrusted dragon?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be rich and I'd be fiery. It would be great.
And this is Kurt. Probably a Pegasus.
Yeah, so that was just, the audio is not super great because I just gave them really cheap little mobile devices, but for them listening to it, it's like really cool, and it's almost like a little thing that you can give them at the end of the retreat. And I think they had fun doing it.
Sounds like it.
So that's just something to think about doing. But anyway, as I was saying, you can also collect audio to get information from people about their stories and why they did things and how they did things. And something that I'm working on now is collecting oral histories of people who live in West Philadelphia and who are part of Movement for New Society, which was a group of people in the 70s who moved to West Philadelphia and tried to create social change through kind of community development. It's a little hard to articulate exactly and define, but it was really pretty radical, and I was really interested in learning more about it because I moved to West Philadelphia. I was like, there's all these group houses, and there's a co-op, and there's right now there's like an anarchist center. I was like, how did West Philly get to be this way? And so I did some investigating, and I was like, oh, this is part of a history, and a lot of the people that are there are still there. And I actually interviewed Seth for it because Seth was part of it, so you can ask him about it. And I'm collecting their stories and putting them on a website. And so it's not just to collect history so that people know the histories, although that's part of it. It's also to collect information about, like, how do you do this? How do you have house meetings? How do you start a co-op? How do you revive a co-op? How do you live successfully with people in alternative economic structures or whatever? So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I used some audio in this, so if you click on one of these pages, this is a good example.
So each one of these pictures is a story.
Yeah, each picture is a story, or it's a person / house. And then, the plugin doesn't seem to be working. But anyway, there's little tiny audio pieces from their interviews. And I'm kind of in the process of redoing this whole thing, but...
For those of you who have organizations that have a long history or, older members whose memories are important to the context of the organization, it's a great way to capture it and tell the story just the same way.
A good way to build your sense of community within your organization. Because when people hear their own voices and people hear voices of people they know, it makes everything a little tighter.
Well, and it brings up an interesting question that we were talking about earlier when people were talking about what they wanted to learn about, which is interview and interview style. Do you, for example, when you're going and looking at all these people in West Philly, ask sort of a set of questions? Do you do pre-interviews? How do you make people comfortable? So, for example, most of the time when I'm doing the LD podcast, I'll send out a list of here's sort of what I want to do and the questions that I'm interested in asking, and then have them add anything, but tell them these are sort of, milestones about things that I'd like to cover, but we're really having a conversation. So it's less, Matt Lauer. So how did you feel about this? I hated it. Okay, next question, But it's more of a conversation because I just find that a lot more interesting and engaging. So that's how I chose to do things. When I'm doing the LD podcast, it's more of a conversation around a specific topic. So I will have a sheet of things to make sure that I hit high points that I need to hit, but it's less kind of pre-scripted. So I know you do a lot of different interviews, and you do too. So
yeah, you have to react. If you're doing the interview, I don't know if you're doing the interview or you're just doing the tech part. But if you're doing an interview, you have to react to what they're saying. But you also have to come in with a plan. You just can't come in. So what do you do? You can ask that too. But you have to have a point. You have to start with a point. It can end up anywhere else, but you really have to come in with a plan, and then react to what they're saying.
It's almost like storyboarding if you're doing video. You have to figure out where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by when you say plan? Like, what was your plan for the piece you created about the dancing?
I knew that the point. I knew what the whole thing was. What their project was. I knew that the day before this happened. I knew that they would be out there, that they would be engaging with people, with strangers, to do this thing. So I knew I wanted to get them talking to strangers. I wanted to catch that sound. The idea that they would hold a cell phone playing Alicia Keys kind of came up out of nowhere. But I remember, one time, I did this show in Berkeley, and it was about cinema, and someone just premiered a film at Sundance and came back to the Bay Area, and my co-host, a guy named Greg, we had him on live, and he said, "So, what happened in Sundance?" And that was his opening question, and I nearly strangled him because it's way too broad, and the subject goes. A million things happen. Oh, here's a better example. I had to interview a woman. She was I can't remember what religious denomination she was, but they were against war, and they refused to pay taxes because their taxes went to a war machine, and they were using freedom of religion, freedom of speech point to justify not paying taxes. One guy was sent to jail. I interviewed his wife at a service. This is out in Vineland. And she had never been interviewed before. She was not media savvy. She lived in this little religious community. And her husband was in jail. And she didn't know who I was. I came in out of nowhere. And so I asked her questions. And I put the mic on her and said, "Okay, what's going on? Tell me, who are you and what do you do?" And she just froze. She maybe wept. I don't know what she did, but she had so much in her brain right then. And she had so much emotion happening. And she didn't know how to say it. And opened up with this too broad a question and she did nothing. And then I turned the tape off and said, okay, whatever you have to say, we're going to say it all, and we're going to take time to say it. We're going to take it in little bits. I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to answer them, and we'll get through the whole thing. So you don't have to say everything right now at the outset. We'll stretch it out. We'll be here for an hour, whatever. And she's still freaked out, but we did it. We made it through. And so that's a sort of an extreme example. I think most people, maybe the people you do will be that keyed up. But she was in a really keyed up position at that time, at that moment, and she couldn't do anything. So you have to, and I kind of knew the situation already. I knew her husband was in jail. I knew they were conscientious objectors to taxes, and I had some information coming in, so I could ask her questions and sort of draw her out. So that's what I kind of mean by a plan. You kind of have to know what the situation is before you step into it so that you can get what you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and it was interesting, Mother's Day just passed, and I've been doing this podcasting class with these kids out at Kennett Middle School. And we found the same thing was really true. If you ask your kid, what's the favorite thing that your mom does? They're sort of like, I have a mom? Yeah, I thought I had a mom. That sort of thing. But if you say, what's your favorite breakfast, a memory, you sort of sometimes broader or three things rather than one thing. Somebody's trying to figure out, well, what's the best thing? And then the time that they're taking for the hierarchy of what's really the best is sort of prohibitive. But if you leave it more open or more conversational, it leaves them more space to kind of breathe and think about things and start talking. And once you start people talking, oftentimes you really can't get them to shut up because everybody really does like talking about themselves. But you have to be able to kind of elicit that and drop it off. And part of it is not making people feel like they're put on the spot and making it more open and broad. And so, sometimes that's narrowing the question actually gets them started, and then things can go from there. And then you can always edit things down if you've got too much information. But, just like in video where you want a lot of background stuff so you can cut things in, having too much is better than not having enough and going like, oh, God, I should have asked that. So.
Yeah.
I think we have the capability of playing audio through the back computer, I'm told. So, Madeline, you had another example you wanted to play. Are you ready to play back there?
It's really just because the widget's not showing up here.
Do you have that site?
The Pamela Haynes one, and I guess the Good Life
there it is.
one.
It's popping up there.
Oh, it is.
There it is.
Yay!
That's a good sign.
Oh, I'm hearing my voice now. Could you stop it and then start it? Because I can hear my own voice at this point. Could you stop it and start it again? Because I can hear my voice now playing over it.
I think they had the live stream was up, but I think they turned it off.
Okay, cool. So this is...
They moved to the 70s. The 70s. And stayed. I love the way that's paced. I love the way you paced.
Yeah. So that was, so it was kind of like collecting her story and then also answering my question, like, what does a good life mean?
How much interaction was actually taking place? How many questions were you asking her in the middle, or did she just talk mostly nonstop?
I asked her, she's pretty eager to talk, but I'd say she would talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'd ask her a follow-up question. But for that, I really just went in. I didn't even really know what I was doing, though. I knew that I wanted to capture something, and I knew that people had stories, and so I would just go in and say, when did you move to West Philly, and why are you here, and why do you try and create social change? Like, why do that, of all things to do? And so it's pretty open. I didn't have a plan, but it also made for a lot of audio and not a really clear project, but which I could do because it was mine and I could do whatever I want.
Any questions from the audience? You got some experts up here.
Yeah, I may be wrong about this. I can speak up. It sounds so big in here. But my understanding is that Terry Gross does most of her interviews by phone.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess I'm wondering, for any of you who want to talk about it, given your focus on audio, is it sometimes easier to not have a person in front of you and just have their voice? How does that work?
Well, technically, fresh air sounds great, and technically it's a feat. You have to put someone to have it sound as good as it sounds on fresh air. Terry is in a studio in Philadelphia. You hire a studio wherever the other person is, and you link by an ISDN line, and you get that clean audio. If you have that kind of resources, I say go for it, but most of us don't. Most of us do phone tape. There's a little doohickey you can hook up to your phone, and you can pull audio out of your phone and send it into your recorder, and you can record what's called phone tape. Does it sound that great? You can put it through a lot of filters to kind of clean it up. But yeah, the reason Terry Gross does it is for two reasons. One of them is more practical than the other. It forces you to not rely on visual cues when you're in conversation. If you're looking at the person, a tremendous amount of information is being projected through your body and through your expressions. And she wants to cut that out. She wants to force people to say what they mean rather than evade by waving their arms around like I'm doing. Also, there's a more practical thing. If someone comes into the studio, you have to greet them at the door. You have to give them coffee. You have to say hi to them. And then after the interview, you sort of have to wind down with them and then send them out. And it's a daily operation. They got to crank out stuff fast. So if you do it in a separate studio, you can just, thanks, click, done, edit. And then it's a cleaner. They don't want to have to deal with the small talk of inviting someone into the studio.
Now, there are a couple of ways that you can do what Terry Gross does at a much lower cost and almost sound as good. There's a technique called a double ender where you arrange to talk to the person over the telephone, but you have the person at the other end with a recorder just like yours, recording their side of the conversation while you're talking to them, and then they send you the recorder or the file from their end, and you sync the two of them in post-production and take out the telephone line, so that you have the two audio channels of the person who's in that room, and it sounds like you're talking to each other. Another way, and if you can't do that, we've had very good success recording telephone calls over Skype using a tool called Call Burner. It's an add-on for Skype that lets you record a WAV file, and again, a stereo file, so each side of the conversation is on a separate channel. And when you get it into post-production, you can split them and then manipulate the sound quality of each channel separately. So that and then what you do is you cancel out the left and right effect. You make it a mono file for the final interview. So it's possible to do it. It's obviously the way that she's doing it is the ideal way. But
Well, yeah, and I do.
on a shoestring budget, you can look at some of the other alternatives.
I hack it a slightly different way, which is I take Skype and I run it into my mixer, and then I record into my digital recorder plugged into the mixer, so I'm not actually doing the recording with the software on the computer. So I get rid of the computer noise and all of that other stuff, because oftentimes, even if you've got a fairly speedy computer, and this used to be a real problem back even 3 or 4 years ago, because things couldn't handle dealing with that much stuff and your computer would crash, or you would get Skype malfunctioning and everybody would sound like robots underwater, and you just can't clean that crap up. I have tried Sound Soap, and there are some things where you just really do have to admit to somebody you're going to have to re-record an interview, assuming they're going to give you another hour of their time, and that is particularly when I'm looking at experts in different fields. It can be really, really embarrassing. So that's why I went to recording externally from the computer and then getting the file. This stuff is on an SD card and then putting it back in the computer and editing it. That way got almost fresh air quality sound from doing those interviews without dealing with the other ways of hooking up to a regular telephone line.
Yeah, Skype to Skype can be really remarkably good.
It can
be remarkably bad, but a lot of times it can be good.
And it just depends on the day and sunspots and stuff like that. But most of the time it's worthwhile doing. And then there's other quick hacks. My friends Chris Penn and John Wall do a show called Marketing Over Over Coffee, and they actually do it as a Google Plus thing. So they're on Google Plus. They're both talking, so they've got a little video, and then they strip out the audio and then put it out as an audio file. So you can do it both ways.
Personally,
Separate mic rather than computer mic.
For yourself?
It's better. I mean, the computer mic is sort of, yeah.
Yeah,
We could go on about microphones all day, but
when I record people over Skype, before we record, I always tell them to make sure they're using at least a headset microphone, because what people tend to do with Skype when you're talking to your kids who are away at college, they're talking through the mic in the computer, and you can tell immediately because you can hear the fan sound very, very loud and the voice not so loud. So definitely, at the very least, a headset mic.
All right. If I interview someone on the telephone, especially if they use speakerphone, especially if there's more than one person in the room, they just turn the speakerphone on. It's like, hi, we're here. And then I tell them, please pick up the handset. And because the speakerphones sound terrible. This is, really basic stuff, but really important. Put the microphone in front of the person's mouth. It's very, very important to put the microphone in the front of the person's mouth. Yeah.
Yes.
I listen to a coast-to-coast radio. They have interviews and people call in, and it always sounds pretty good. And I was saying I listen to Coast to Coast Radio, if anybody's ever heard it. It's a call-in interview show that's nationwide. And people call in from all over the country, and they sound awfully good. Even truck drivers call in.
Is it a radio broadcast or an internet
Yeah, it's on
broadcast?
12:10 a.m. It's all over the country. It's got 25
Probably using really good equipment.
What's that?
They're probably using really good equipment. There are telephone talk shows. They have very expensive, what are called phone bridges, that bring the audio in from the telephone. And you can actually get pretty good audio from a telephone line if you have the right processing on the back end. But what do you guys use for Radio Times? What is she using?
Telos, something or other. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what. But she's using pretty good stuff. Yeah. They have some sort of process.
It's expensive, that Telos thing?
They can be. I use, it costs like $30 at Radio Shack to plug into my phone. When I do phone interviews at work, it's just a phone tap.
you have to let people know for legal reasons
Yeah,
that
but
you
you
are
have to
recording
say,
it.
before, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
It's the having got to law
Depends on what
school.
state you're in.
If you're recording someone over the phone, you're legally obligated to tell them on the recording, after you've hit go, you are being recorded, please state your name, just to cover your bases.
Let me see.
But I put an EQ filter on the phone. When I record phone tape on my just little phone tap, it does, if you can push it through an EQ filter, an equalizer, and take out all the high end, because that's where all the hum is, and bump up your bass a little bit, it's a little more audible.
Harold, can you put up this laptop?
Yeah.
Most of the Telos interfaces on eBay are anywhere between $400 to $300, something like that.
Yeah, the thing about if you're doing like Radio Times, it's a call-in show, so people are assuming that people are on the phone, because it always sounds like a phone, you know, unless you're doing like studio to studio, and that's something that I struggle with because I work in an office that has regional offices, so when I'm interviewing people, I always have to interview them over the phone. And you can get equipment, you know, you can buy it, but it's always going to kind of sound like a phone.
Right.
Which is, you know, if that's what you're going for, that's fine.
It is a little distancing. If that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. I mean, you're not going to buy a plane ticket to Boston or something.
Yeah.
But if you can get them face to face, I mean, part of the power of sound is the intimacy of it, and that's what sticks. That's because you can hear the person and you can hear the way they talk, and it's something very personal about sound. And you lose a lot of that over the phone. It sounds distancing.
So this is the wish book for people who do audio. This is a broadcast
One Powerball.
broadcast supply worldwide, which has all kinds of tools and bells and whistles for broadcasting. But if you look at this site, you'll see some of the high-end call director type equipment that's used for telephone call-in shows, and the price just escalates. You can get in there for between $150 and $200, but then if you want to do the Radio Times thing, it's way more. Probably out of reach of most of us. What else is on your mind?
I had a comment about, I'm assuming a lot of you work for nonprofits, some of you at least, or you have clients or something, and something about content. When you line up someone to interview them, or the kind of content you want, you kind of do want to look for stories and people who are involved in the nuts and bolts of something. Here, I'll give an example. When the Philadelphia Orchestra started their season last fall, it was the first season after they had come out of bankruptcy. So it was a really big deal for them. It was sort of an historic season. And they really wanted to work with us at HRY, to create some stories that would sort of announce that we are out of bankruptcy and we are a viable organization. And so we kind of tossed around the idea what to do. And they always offered us the president and CEO of the organization, Alison Vogelmore, or Richard Worley, the chairman of the board. And I've interviewed these people for spots, for short interviews. They're not good. I mean, they're so mission-driven. The orchestra is healthy. We are online to cover our debts, and we're going to be better. Really, they just loop it.
Yeah.
And she's memorized these bullet points, and I covered the bankruptcy proceedings that lasted like a year and a half, and she had the same script every time I met her. And so when it came time to do this thing, like, we're new season, let's do this thing, let's have Alison Vogelmore. No. That's not what's going to work. I want to talk to the musicians. And what we did, we kind of, the organization is prepared for this season. How are the musicians preparing for this season? And they said, give us access to the musicians, which is tough because they have their own union and they have their own union rules, and they don't have to be available to do this sort of thing. But we got them, and we asked them, so what do you do to prepare? What's in your gig bag? What do you carry in your violin case? What do you wear to? We had the cellist show us her closet. We have certain things we have to wear. We have to wear 3/4 sleeve black dresses for evening shows, and for day shows we can wear cream dresses. And so she had this closet full of black dresses and a closet full of cream dresses, and the variations. And so we did something like that. And one guy does yoga. The trombonist, before a show, sits in the dressing room and does yoga and breathing exercises. So he had us do those. So we wanted to get that kind of down into it, like, how do you really be an orchestra? We didn't want the bullet points from the president. So if you're, it's an idea of content. If you're working for an organization and they want, we really want to get our message out. Yes, you want to get that message out, but you don't want to do bullet points, and you don't want the chief administrator to come on and gas on for 15 minutes about what a great organization this is, because no one's going to listen to that. maybe the president of your organization is great, and he or she can really get personal with it. But the personal stories really work best. So if you can sort of push for, and I think a lot of the organizations that I've mentioned, you have some great stories in there, like the Keystone Boys Choir. Oh, he's gone now. Oh, there he is. I think I did a story about them once. And they're boys who have lives outside of choir, and they have families, and they have. Why are you doing this? I mean, it's great. And so if it's possible to really get down to the personal level, who runs this organization and why, and what are their lives like? That's the kind of thing you want to do, I think.
I agree. I mean, I'm currently working with one potential nonprofit, and, they have this great thing. We're going to support research. Awesome. They're raising money to support research and having physicians go out and do all sorts of life-changing stuff. They are dropping the ball because they are not looping back in with their donors and everything. What is the money that's already been donated actually done? Where is the research leading? What are the changes being made? So think about it as the entire loop. Particularly if you're a nonprofit, you really want to have that entire loop from here's the money, here's what it does. The Red Cross recently did something that was kind of cool. They sent out little cameras to people that had gotten support and everything through Sandy to take a bunch of pictures about what the neighborhoods looked like and how things were improving, and then send that back, and then they were using that on the website. But that's a before and after kind of thing, and it shows the progress. And if you really want to get donors involved, people want to know where their money's going. You can get them to donate once or twice, but unless you're showing the demonstrable evidence of where it's going, it's hard to get them continually locked in because there's other things they can do. Everybody's got stress. I give to HYY because not only do I use it all the time, but, they're constantly showing me what they're doing with it, and it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, for nonprofits, I just seen so many videos of, and heard so many stories of, constituents talking about how the organization benefited them, and I don't think that works for donor. I don't know. I don't think that I don't know. But it seems like creating content that's a little bit more creative, that actually illustrates not how the organization's succeeding,
not the process, but the actual tangible results.
Yeah, or maybe using audio as a strategy for getting the results that they want, not just using it as a way to show, oh, this is what we did, or telling a different side of the story, using it in a different way than that, I think would be really. I haven't quite sorted this out, but I'm just so tired of hearing the same story of how some kid was helped, that I think that it's time to shift the way it's used, and I think what you're saying is part of it. It's not, WHYY, you give to WHYY because the content they produce, that they're really living out their mission well by creating audio. And so, I don't know. It's not very articulate, but I think there's stuff that needs
It can be a way to get deeper into the story behind the organization without there's a formula that everybody's pretty much adopted.
Sort of
we're going to sell the organization by showing the kid the kid who's being helped, and all of us produce those kind of stories from time to time. But you want to get. I like the idea of going to musicians. I was thinking stagehands and property wranglers, and how are they getting ready? Everybody sees the musicians in the tuxedos, but nobody sees the guy who's moving the sets.
Right. People want audio to show them something that they couldn't learn other ways.
Yeah.
And know the difference between show and tell. There's a lot of stuff that you can talk about, but if it's really just going to be two talking heads, don't use video for that sort of stuff. You can use audio and get a lot more across than than the Sunday morning gas bags, as Calvin Trillin calls them.
And you reminded me of one other aspect of this that I wanted to bring up. There's a woman from Boston. Her name is Paula Lerner. She passed away, I think, earlier this year, or maybe it was last year. She won I think it was an Emmy Award for a multimedia project that she did. We may not be able to play them on this. She had done audio interviews for NPR with a woman who got active in politics in Kandahar in Afghanistan, and who subsequently was assassinated by the Taliban for getting involved in politics. But she's a photographer, and she went to Afghanistan with her audio recorder and her cameras and did a photo slideshow compilation of this discussion with this woman, which was extremely compelling. Here it is. It got an Emmy Award. I'm going to try and play it. Let's see if it'll work. It was called Behind the Veil, and they used it on a couple of NPR stations and a couple of, on the network. See if it'll come up. But the idea of combining still photography with audio it can also be compelling and doesn't have to cost as much as trying to produce video, or not be as complicated. There are some pretty good slideshow creation programs you can get that will allow you to mix slides and audio and even video together and put in all kinds of special effects relatively easily. So that's another way to tell your story.
Yeah. There's actually a really great thing called 1 in 8 million. There's a New York Times project, actually, where they did similar slideshows, audio slideshows, if you can't find this one.
And now you know we're in a big city.
Okay. Well, I think at this point we're going to invite you all to just hang out with us and ask questions privately of folks if you want. I appreciate your taking the time to be with us. And if you have any questions about social audio, these are the folks to ask. Thank you all.